Hey everyone, today I wanted to go over some new and interesting news that we have for Wild Hearts. This is the new Monster Hunter-like game from EA and in collaboration with Koei Tecmo, which is set to drop in just a few weeks for PlayStation and Xbox consoles as well as PC. And today what we're going to be checking out is a preview of the final build of the game. Basically, 4Gamer.net put out a recent article on the Japanese website. I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below, where they got to play pretty much the official release build of the game, not one of those preview builds that some streamers got a chance to play a few months back, but the actual game. I believe reviews will be dropping within the next few days as well, and we finally got a little bit of a more interesting in-depth look for the game, as reviews will inevitably give us a full glimpse. Remember that EA has been putting out some sort of gameplay clips. You should be seeing some of those there, but they're kind of like scripted. We haven't necessarily seen full raw gameplay. Even the like game streams that we got to see were a little bit kind of scripted, so we haven't necessarily gotten a full perspective on the game. There was also a developer interview and quick AMA happening on Reddit a few days back. So maybe at the back end of this video, I'm going to cover some of the things that we didn't necessarily know that were also covered there as well. But first and foremost, what this article kind of opens up with is kind of like the character creation. They very much give a little bit of a glimpse as to what you should be expecting. And they kind of like praise the fact that the game has all types of modifiers when you are trying to create your character, whether it be male or female, adjustments of eyes, positioning, height of nose, thickness of the lips, nasal spots, wrinkles. You can make your character look beautiful and young or seasoned and veteran, pretty much the entire range of it. Even expressions of like personality can be adjusted as well. So if you want your character to smile in a very specific way, that can also be adjusted, which what they're calling a little bit of a touch of ingenuity for a little bit of a character creator. One of the things they also touch upon very early on is the exploration of different areas. They mentioned that you will be exploring plenty of massive fields. There will be plenty of variations from right at the beginning. You'll be, discovering creeks, spacious grasslands, snowy forests, cliffside areas, the works. The open maps, kind of like one of the things that they praise heavily, and exploration is very quick as well. They specifically mentioned that whilst you're exploring, you have access to, of course, just a simple button jump for the ability to be able to jump, but they also have a dash ability there as well. You also have like a little bit of a dodge that you can take advantage of if you so desire. And going uphill will make your character strut and move a little bit faster. Going downhill will actually speed them up even more. While you traverse, you also have the chance to pick up these items that they're calling like healing water, which will let you pretty much fully recover your entire health bar. If you're like traversing from one spot to another, if you're kind of like chasing a monster, you instantly can heal without having to use any sort of like healing materials from your normal inventory. You also have the opportunity to be able to pick up, of course, the Karakuri thread, which we're going to be talking about in just a second. But they also specifically talk about like picking up materials, kind of like as you're moving, is almost instantaneous. You can pick up gathering materials. Mining takes relatively fast. You're not going to be stopping there for too long. So kind of like collecting material as you move from one place to another is going to be widely acceptable as fast. Another one of the things that they specifically mention is that not only do you have, of course, the big massive monsters you are going to be hunting, but you also have smaller monsters as well that usually in monster quote-unquote taming game, which is the words that EA has been using for quite a while, you usually end up killing them to be able to kind of like collect their materials. But this time around, you can actually pet them and they'll be able to give you the same amount of rewards as if you would have actually just taken that monster down. So you don't necessarily need to feel bad if you don't want to take down the specific monster. You don't necessarily need to feel like you have to hunt them. You could just kind of pet them. You can sneak up on them, pet them, get the same rewards. You don't have to kill them. At the same time though, big monsters do have a surprise or sneak attack where you can kind of like just get a sneak up on them and do massive damage right out of the outset. One of the things that we have seen in the gameplay clips is that you can, of course, have a big final blow, and that will also net you extra reward for the person who gets that, kind of like final blow as well. Another point that they kind of praised in this article is that the encampment, essentially the camp, if you will, whenever you're hanging out, whenever you're out in the field, You have a bonfire, but you also have a hunting table, and you have a blacksmith's anvil. So not only can you like heal up your health, craft materials, but you can also craft armors there as well. So you can kind of just stay out in the field. They kind of tout the fact that you don't necessarily have to go back to the village and like recuperate to pick up more quests. You can do that as you're out in the field. You can just go back to the tent, kind of like reorganize, reset yourself up, and get back out there if you want. They don't necessarily mention if you can go from one big zone to another. They haven't necessarily explained that, but it seems to be like, you don't necessarily have to go back to the village if you don't want to, or at the very least, that can be minimized at a greater cost if you don't necessarily want to be traversing. Of course, if you're playing in current gen consoles, fast loading times shouldn't necessarily be a problem, but it's something worth considering. And of course, gathering materials is key. They mentioned that not only will you be able to gather materials relatively fast, but also making use of them. So the entire crafting system is relatively fast. You kind of just tell the game what it is that you want. They do kind of like make it seem like the idea of like setting a favorite piece of armor that you want to craft. You got a set list on the left side of the screen telling you what it is that you're going to want to craft, what materials you want to pick up, where to go to get them, what monsters to take down to get those extras, and be able to relatively craft it with ease, so you don't necessarily need to feel like you're kind of a little bit clueless as to where it is and where to go to be able to craft specifically the armor that you're after. Now, in the back end of the article, they do specifically get into combat, and they speak about how the giant beast, if you will, the Karakuri, are these big monsters that obviously you need to avoid to be able to kind of like not necessarily get taken down or waste too much health on. One of the counter attack abilities that the longsword has, or whatever they end up calling it, but it essentially is a longsword, is kind of like one of those shielding abilities. So not only does it can be used as a defensive mechanism for you to be able to kind of defend yourself, but also use it as an offensive direct counter attack whenever a monster is getting ready to attack. And that is one of the things that they kind of also mentioned in this article, that monsters seem to have pretty clear tells for their attacks. You're never going to be like surprised about their agility or anything like that. Everything seems to be slow and methodical, not only for you, but for them as well, which, is going to be interesting for the playing style for some players. And sorry, I meant the kimono. That's the actual monsters. The Karakuri is the crafting side of things. So one of the things that they mention is that you can preset your Karakuri. This would be your crafting options from the L1. So you can just hold L1, circle, X, triangle, square if you're using on PlayStation, or A, B, X, Y on Xbox or PC, and instantly craft something that you have preset as long as you have enough thread. Now, the whole thing about thread, this is something that even in the previews was kind of like discussed a little bit, where it can be a little bit tedious to have to go picking up thread to make sure you have enough throughout the entire combat, so you can continually craft more and more in-depth Karakuri, even with other players, to be able to kind of make even more massive, more defensive, more offensively minded, traps to be able to take advantage of. That is one of the criticisms, even in this specific final build preview, that they kind of speak about, that having enough thread is going to be one of those things that you're constantly going to have to be thinking about, and most likely will end up being one of those things where if you are not making full use of the Karakuri, it's because you just don't want to pick up more thread. Essentially, you don't want to gather before a hunt, or as you're moving from one point to another, to kind of like trail a monster and make sure you pick up enough thread to be able to craft more traps. That is one of the things that even they're mentioning that it's probably going to have to end up getting adjusted, because players might not necessarily want to spend the time to have to go pick up and gather materials before every single hunt. Now, the last thing that they talk about is kind of like permanent progression. You can create zip lines, ropes, long travel distance, kind of tools, even a Karakuri that kind of looks like a one-wheeled motorcycle kind of thing, like a big water wheel that you're riding on, and those are permanent. So once you craft one, you can just kind of continually use them. You make them available on the field. They're there permanently. You don't have to craft them again or anything like that. So it's something that is going to be a little bit of a progression sign that you've done something, therefore is readily available to you for the near future. And at the end of the day, the article does mention that the game does seem to have a little bit of a lack of monsters, big monsters. They don't necessarily give a final number. I'm not necessarily sure if EA has actually said just what the final monster count has been. Even in the Q&A, I don't recall them mentioning just what the final number of that will be. And I'm sure that will be addressed. One of the things that they did address in the Q&A is that all future DLC will be free. There will be no microtransaction is what they're actually saying. But remember, one of the original articles that came out, I want to say might have been an IGN article or something like that. They specifically said that when the game launched, in this launch period, whatever that is, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, they would not have microtransactions in this launch period. They would consider introducing them at a later date. Now they're saying that there will be no microtransactions whatsoever and all DLC will be free. So, that's interesting. At the same time, of course, if you pre-order like the $90 version, or if you get like the deluxe, or you pre-order whatever, you're gonna get like extra goodies as well. So those items will be locked out from anyone else who didn't necessarily buy or pre-order the deluxe edition or the collector's edition or whatever they're calling it. So that's interesting. That's still yet to be worked out. We don't know the details, and that's kind of like what I was hoping the Q&A would kind of answer, but they didn't really get into too much depth like that. The questions were definitely they kind of picked ahead of time what it is that they wanted to answer, and we didn't necessarily get to see a lot of more details that we would have expected. But that's about all the information that I have for Wild Hearts today. I've been posting a couple of gameplay clips from the new monsters, hoping that this game is gonna be interesting. But again, the whole scripted gameplay that we have seen so far hasn't necessarily left me too convinced as to what the final build will be like. Hopefully this article sheds some light. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.